Hello, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't, please hit subscribe. Please click like. In this video, we're going to talk about the Baron's Racer. Absolutely gorgeous. I think one of the most exotic looking snakes you can keep that are one of the easiest to keep. They really are. Hardy, easygoing, no trouble at all, and absolutely beautiful. This is a typical colour form, the green form, which really are stunning. They come in browns. It's all about your personal taste. I prefer the green, and they come in a lovely greenish blue form, which in the UK are only bred by, I think, one person, and they're quite expensive, but they do look glorious. Any blue snake, it does look something else. The green, pretty good compromise at a very good price. These aren't expensive snakes really. They've just got that sort of vine snake, tropical arboreal snake look about them. They're long noses, longer in the males, these are both females, and they're sort of quite large forward facing eyes. Really do give them an exotic snake look indeed. And those noses, my goodness me, makes them so absolutely endearing. It just gives them the cuteness factor. They almost have a cute smiley looking face. Personality wise, Baron's Racers cannot be beaten. One of those animals that when you open up their enclosure, they come out, not aggressively, they just come out and they'll span, they'll plank to get on your hands, go up your arm and come and explore. They really do have, whoa, so we've got typical prehensile tail of an arboreal snake. They really do have that sort of fun factor. They're so inquisitive without being aggressive. So we've got a snake that looks like it's a real tropical rainforest arboreal tree living species, and they're not. They can climb and they can be incredibly arboreal. Mine like to live up on a ledge. These snakes will do equally fine in a standard elongated, relatively low level vivarium. Your typical rat snake setup, more about that later. They're from sort of central of South America. I just can't vouch for how easy these are to care for and how tolerant they are of a wide range of conditions in captivity for something that just looks this good. Dry as substrate. I would keep the substrate if you use the coir fibre like I do, the coir peat for your baby snakes like I do. I keep it slightly damp when they're smaller and younger. But a dry substrate locks up their sort of typical colubrid poo, spot clean, water clean. You don't need particularly high humidity. You can dampen down the substrate more than enough when they're pre-shed. You won't have any problems. And as you'll see later on in the video, an ambient of around 28 degrees Celsius. I'm literally handcuffed together. Slightly warmer hotspot is great, and all the lighting goes off in this reptile room on a timer, and it's heated to an ambient in the winter, which is now, to 21 degrees centigrade at night. So they get a nighttime drop and they're just fine. Something you'll notice about Baron's Racers if you keep them is this. Come on guys. Bearing in mind this is a snake that can grow to about 6 feet long. This tiny head can swallow bigger things than just about any snake you can imagine. A hatchling, tiny little narrow-bodied creature with a tiny head, they'll swallow pinky mice no problem at all. Look at the size of this one. These ones' favourite food is frozen thawed day-old cockerels. We're talking something this kind of size. No problem at all. Just look at it, look at their tiny heads. It has to be seen to be believed. They'll eat just about anything, and people say these are really, really greedy snakes. Well, they are, and they're not. So what I find is they have greedy spells. You can see mine have got plenty of weight on them. And then they'll have spells where they're not so greedy, not the typical gluttonous pigs that they're made out, or we're led to believe they are. They can be absolutely, good night again, ferocious greedy feeders. If you feed your snakes well, and nothing's changed with your balance racers, and they've gone off their food and they've got good body weight, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. That's typical for many, many snakes, and it's probably just the fact they've had more than enough food in captivity for a while. As long as they've got good body weight, they'll switch back on. Mine, they eat anything. They did eat anything. Small rats, baby mice, rat pups, Dale cockerels. They've definitely got a bit of a preference now, and they'll often not touch a mouse, but they'll eat a Dale cockerel. They've got a little bit fussy. It's obviously something they prefer. And you could say, being an arboreal snake, birds are going to be high on their menu. These things eat reptiles in the wild, they'll eat rodents, and they'll do that in captivity. They are the most incredible snakes. Males have a longer nose, so probably look even more cute and you know, cuter than usual. These guys here, you can just see how inquisitive they are. These guys here are both females. I did obtain a male, a brown-faced male, a year younger than these, as a grown-on hatchling. To be honest, a friend of mine collected it. It was from a reptile shop far away. He collected it to do me a favour. I didn't view the snake, and it was one of those youngsters that, excuse me, it was one of those youngsters that when you see it, you think, it's a snake that's too thin and too small for its age. Possibly underfed, possibly a picky feeder. It came here, very picky feeder. It actually lasted several months but never really came to anything, and in the end it just faded away. So these girls definitely need a boyfriend, which I'm going to try and obtain already grown on. These are 3 years old now. I don't really want to wait sort of another 2 or 3 years for these to grow, for a male to catch up, although certainly these could do with being another year older. I'm going to pop one away actually, to see if we can stretch one of these girls out so you can see her. Okay, here we are. Let's see what we can do. So remember, the females, they can touch 6 feet in length. So first off, you can see perfectly at home up in the trees and the understory. Don't let that fool you. They're not a tropical rainforest snake that lives in the tops of the trees. They really are really adaptable indeed. Just have a look at how beautiful these snakes actually are. I'm more than happy with having the green phase. Would I like some blue ones? Of course I would. But these guys, sorry darling, would you like to let go? Very, very long already. Very long already, but plenty of growing to do indeed. Something we haven't touched on, these are rear fang venomous. Mild venom, not considerably serious enough to be considered DWA here in the UK. If you're working with captive bred Barons racers from a reputable breeder, you want to get them already feeding. They can be picky to get going. I've even heard people using pieces of hard-boiled egg to get the youngsters going. You're going to get them from a good breeder. If you have a Barons racer and you're a calm person when you handle your snakes, and you get one that bites, you've done well, because they are the most lovely, placid snakes to work with. These guys never bit me at all, and like I say, they're nothing but inquisitive. So to actually get bitten, let alone envenomated from a rear fang bite, I don't know, you're going to have to be pretty clumsy indeed. They are that good. If they weren't rear fang venomous, I'd say one of the cutest, nicest to handle and work with, easy to keep beginner snakes out there. Honestly, for something this exotic, but of course we can't call something a beginner snake, something for kids if it is rear fanged. But you know, should I say this? I don't know. I would not worry about the fact they're rear fanged if you're a grown up and you keep snakes. They really are just so easy going indeed. So bear that in mind. They are rear fangs, venomous snakes. They are absolutely beautiful. They do grow to a fair size, but it's a skinny big snake, isn't it? It's not like a huge heavyweight python. A 6 foot one of these. Well, let's have a look. I bet this is 4 feet long if we stretch it out, and yet of course it's going to spend most of its time in that much space, chilled out. So, key facts, easy to keep. Don't keep them in a hot, sweaty, tropical rainforest setup. They'll end up with skin rot if you're not careful, scale rot if you're not careful. A much drier setup suits them fine. Greedy feeders, even when small. Don't be feeding them little tiny food items just as big as their head, like you might a dry mark on or false water cobras. These can have a decent sized meal and they'll grow well on it. It's unbelievable to see. Fresh water, of course. UV lighting, that's up to you. Under fluorescent lighting, anything with colour certainly looks better. Do they need UV? That's up to you. In my opinion, not at all, for a very long, very healthy lifestyle. Do I handle my snakes regularly to get them this easy going? No, not at all. I bet I don't even handle these guys once a week, and they've never had intensive handling from youngsters, just like all of my snakes. It's not how often you handle them, it is how you handle your snakes. Calmly, without being nervous and shaky, without reacting to defensive bluff and bluster, just calmly pick them up anyway. All of my snakes turn out this good and this handleable, because those nerves, that shaking, you jumping back, it either fuels their bluffing behaviour or you're making that animal nervous itself. Look at that. Let's see if I can nearer the camera. Look at that. Absolutely enthralling species to be around. If you keep colubrid snakes and you haven't got Baron's racers in your collection, you're doing something wrong. Get yourself Baron's racers if you can, for sure. And if you like setups that are sort of beautiful to look at, you like planted enclosures, you like sort of scaped enclosures, looking like a bit of the countryside, a bit of forest, whatever, a bit of rainforest, whatever. Plastic plants or natural plants. Honestly, you could do a lot worse than a setup with Baron's racers. Bearing in mind, they cohab really, really well. When they're in their cycle of really eating well, their real heavy food response time of year, then yes, referee them when you feed them. You don't want two of them fighting over the same food morsel, but they cohab absolutely fine. They seem anthropomorphizing. They seem to enjoy each other's company. Mine certainly do. And they don't seem to bully or hound each other at all. Bearing in mind, these are sisters of a similar size. So I keep mine in a sort of semi-arboreal setup. Obviously with these guys you do need a heat guard. They are going to wrap around or certainly potentially climb around the light of the heat source if that's what you're using. In here the room is fully lit all day and they have the separate or individual light as a light source and a heat source. So they have got height in here. Water bowl, big enough to curl up in. Let's have a look inside. One thing these guys are, they're quite messy with their urates. So if they've got a high vivarium, a high enclosure, you get a lot of this, a bit like a seabird colony. Obviously once it's on here, easily spot clean. Here, you've got to remove it and scrub it. So it kind of looks a little bit messy. Probably not something you're going to be affected by if they're in a lower level or sort of more floor space terrarium rather than high level like this, semi-arboreal. But if you look at it, they spend most of their time on this ledge. So really, you could argue that's just the ground. It's just higher up ground. They're hardly draped over a tree branch like some gorgeous looking green tree python or something. So I would always call these semi-arboreal. They are going to thrive just fine in a low level enclosure with something to climb around, just like any typical rat snake if you like. They don't need to be up in an arboreal setup. But I'll tell you now, I think they do look nicer for it. They do seem to enjoy using that height as well. So here for mine, here, bang on 28 degrees centigrade. So here, up on the ledge, 28 degrees C. This time of year down there, it's around 22, 23 C. And here, under the light, but lower down, about 25 Celsius. So a reasonable range, obviously warmer at the top, or generally is warmer at the top. Basking spot, 28 to 32, as long as they can escape that heat. They don't want the whole enclosure to be sweltered at 32 C. They really don't. They do really seem to like a choice. But in here, this time of year, 28 C, they spend most of their time up there and feed well in that sort of temperature and digest their food really, really well. So I think they look nicer in a semi-arboreal enclosure. Real plants and fluorescent lighting and UV at your discretion. Water bowl to curl up in. I use coir husk once they're at sort of semi-adult side, sub-adult side. Coir husk, you can moisten it, it doesn't mold, so you can increase the humidity if you like, and if it's quite dry, really good at spot cleaning. It's my go-to for my bigger colubrid snakes for sure. House them as you see fit, as you like, as much space as you can give them. Make sure they've got a temperature gradient from something like 30 degrees C down to the sort of mid-20s. Keep them clean, keep the substrate spot clean, plenty of fresh water, and you won't go far wrong with Baron's racers. Incredibly inquisitive and wonderful snakes to have around.